At 1 a.m. on the 29th of July, 1976, 19-year-old Jody Valente and 18-year-old Donna Lauria were sitting in Jody's car outside Donna's home in the Bronx borough of New York. It was a hot summer night and they were discussing their boyfriends. Then Donna said goodnight and opened the door to get out. A young man was standing a few feet away. He was holding a brown paper bag. As the car door opened, he reached into the bag, pulled out a gun, and dropped into the crouching position. "What does this guy want?" said Donna, rather alarmed. Before the words were out of her mouth, a bullet struck her in the side of the neck. A second bullet smashed the window in the door. A third smashed her elbow as she raised her hands to protect her face. Fatally wounded, she tumbled out of the car onto the sidewalk. The killer then shot Jody in the thigh. She fell forward onto the car's horn, which sounded, and the killer made off. Donna's father, Mike Lauria, was taking the family's dog for a walk and was halfway down the stairs when he heard the shots. He ran the rest of the way. Jody was still conscious, though hysterical. In the ambulance, Lauria begged his daughter not to die. It was too late. When Donna reached the hospital, she was pronounced DOA, dead, on arrival. Jody was treated for hysteria, but nevertheless gave the police a good description of their assailant. He was a white male, about 30 years old, clean-shaven with dark curly hair. He was not a rejected boyfriend. In fact, Jody had never seen him before. The only other clue to his identity was a yellow car parked near Jody's, which had gone by the time the police arrived. But New York is full of yellow cars. The car in question actually belonged to David Berkowitz. In the days leading up to the murder, he had been looking for a job, but he had spent the nights, he said, looking for a victim, waiting for a signal. Demon voices inside him told him to kill. "I never thought I could kill her," he said of Donna Lauria. "I just fired the gun, at the car, at the windshield. I never knew she was shot." The North Bronx, where the Laurias lived, was a mainly Italian area, and the police immediately suspected mafia involvement. However, the mafia are usually scrupulous when it comes to contract killings. Women and children are out of bounds. Besides, ballistics tests showed that the murder weapon was a Charter Arms 5-round .44 Bulldog revolver. It had a powerful recoil and was grossly inaccurate at distances of more than a few yards. Hardly a hitman's weapon. On the other side of the East River from the Bronx lies the borough of Queens. It is a comfortable middle-class area. 18-year-old student Rosemary Keenan attended Queens College there. 12 weeks after the murder of Donna Lauria, she went to a bar in the Flushing area of Queens. There she met 20-year-old record salesman Carl DeNaro, who was enjoying his last few days of freedom before joining the Air Force. Rosemary and Carl left together in Rosemary's red Volkswagen. They were parked up, talking, when a man crept up on them. He had a .44 Bulldog handgun tucked in his belt. He may have thought Carl, who was sitting in the passenger seat, was a woman because he had long brown hair. He pulled out his gun and fired 5 times through the passenger window. The shooting was wildly inaccurate and only one bullet found its mark. As Carl threw himself forward to protect himself from flying glass, it clipped the back of his head. It knocked away part of the skull but did not damage the brain. Carl DeNaro was lucky. He did not die. After a 2-month stay in hospital, he recovered completely. But the metal plate they put in his head ended his career in the Air Force before it had begun. Keenan had only superficial injuries from the shattered glass and drove off quickly before there were more shots. On the evening of the 27th of November 1976, 2 schoolgirls, 16-year-old Donna DeMasi and her 18-year-old friend Joanne Lomino, were sitting on the front porch of Joanne's home on 262nd Street in Queens. At the end of the conversation, they said goodnight, and Joanne stood up and reached in her handbag for her front door keys. It was then that the two girls noticed a man walking down the other side of the road. He was acting rather suspiciously. When he saw them, he suddenly changed direction. After crossing the street at the corner, he came over to them as if he was going to ask for directions. Instead, he pulled a gun from his waistband and began firing. The two girls fled toward the front door, Joanne frantically searching for her keys. The first bullet hit her in the back. The second hit Donna in the neck. They stumbled into the bushes as the gunman loosed off the remaining 3 shots, all of which missed. He ran off down 262nd Street and was spotted by a neighbor, gun still in hand. The 2 wounded girls were rushed to Long Island Jewish Hospital, where Donna was found not to be badly injured. After 3 weeks, she made a full recovery, but Joanne was not so lucky. The bullet had smashed her spinal cord. She was paralyzed from the waist down and would spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair. The neighbor who had spotted the gunman making his escape gave the police a description. One key feature he mentioned was the young man's dark, curly hair. This was strange, as the girls themselves claimed that he had long, fair hair. Nevertheless, this tied the shooting of Donna DeMasi and Joanne Lomino to the man who had killed Donna Lauria and wounded Jody Valente. On the 29th of January 1977, 30-year-old John Deal and his 26-year-old girlfriend, Christine Freund, had been to see the movie Rocky in Queens. Afterwards, they went for dinner at the Wine Gallery in Austin Street, where they discussed their forthcoming engagement. Soon after midnight, the couple walked a few blocks to where their Pontiac Firebird was parked. It was cold outside, and their breath fogged the windows. They were eager to get home, but stopped for a moment and kissed. Then John turned the key in the ignition, but before he could pull away, he heard the blast of gunfire. The passenger window shattered and Christine slumped forward, bleeding. She died a few hours later in St. John's Hospital of bullet wounds in the right temple and the neck. She had never even seen her killer, but he had seen her, so had the demons within him. Berkowitz later claimed that he had heard voices commanding him to get her, and kill her. After firing 3 shots and realizing that he had hit her, he felt calm again. The voices stopped, he said. I satisfied the demon's lust. After the murder of Christine Freund, Berkowitz completely gave in to the impulse to kill. After all, he was being rewarded with all the publicity he was getting. I had finally convinced myself that I was good to do it and that the public wanted me to kill, Berkowitz said later. However, the New York Police Department were on his trail. Their ballistics lab ascertained that the bullet that had killed Christine Freund had also come from a .44 Bulldog handgun. That, in turn, tied it to the murder of Donna Lauria and the shootings of Jody Valente, Carl Denaro, Donna DeMasi, and Joanne Lomino. However, apart from the mention of dark curly hair by Jody Valente and the neighbor in the DeMasi-Lomino case, the descriptions of the gunman varied so widely, if he'd been seen at all, that no one in the NYPD had yet concluded that the 4 shootings were the work of a single individual. 6 weeks later, on the 8th of March, 1977, Virginia Voskerichian, a 19-year-old Armenian student, left Columbia University in Manhattan after her day's study and set off home to Forest Hills, Queens. Around 7:30 p.m., she was nearing her home on Exeter Street. A young man was approaching her on the sidewalk, and she politely stepped out of his way. But he pulled a gun and shoved it in her face. She raised her books in a vain attempt to protect herself. He fired. The bullet tore through them. It entered through her upper lip, smashing out several teeth, and lodged in her brain. Virginia collapsed in the bushes at the side of the street and died instantly. A witness saw a young man running away and said he was about 18 and 5'8" in tall, but there was no dark curly hair to be seen. The killer was wearing a balaclava. He was almost caught that day. Minutes after the murder of Virginia Voskerichian, the police put out a code .44. 2 police officers were assigned to the south end of the Bronx with orders to stop all cars containing a single white man. Berkowitz drove up to the checkpoint with his .44 Bulldog loaded and lying in plain view on the passenger seat of his Ford Galaxy. He was third in line when the police called off the search, and he could not believe his luck when he watched the officers walk away. It was quickly established that the bullet that killed Virginia Voskerichian was a .44 caliber. The riflings matched the marks on the bullet that had killed Christine Freund 6 weeks before and just a few miles away. 2 days later, it was established that the same gun was responsible for the shooting of 7 people. On the afternoon of the 10th of March, 1977, a press conference was held at One Police Plaza, the 13-story red stone building that is New York's equivalent of London's New Scotland Yard. Police Commissioner Mike Codd stood with some trepidation before New York's hard-bitten crime reporters. As he read his carefully prepared statement, he began to have an inkling that he was unleashing a wave of hysteria that would engulf the city. He started by saying that the murder of Donna Loria 9 months before was linked to the killing of Virginia Voskerichian a mere 2 days before. In both cases, the killer had used a .44 Bulldog revolver. The same gun had also been used in 3 other incidents. Worse, the killer chose his victims completely at random. Reporters pushed for further information. Commissioner Codd said that the police were looking for a Caucasian male, about 6 feet tall, medium build, 25 to 30 years old, with dark hair. Next day, the .44 caliber killer made the headlines. The man in charge of the investigation was Deputy Inspector Timothy J. Dowd of Omega Task Force set up to capture the .44 killer. Under him was Chief of Detectives John Keenan, who had a special reason for wanting to catch the killer. His daughter was the girl in the car with Carl DeNaro when he was shot in the head. "I know he was aiming for her," Keenan said, "so let's just say I put a little more than I had to into this case." The police realized that their chances of catching a lone, seemingly motiveless killer on the streets of New York were remote, so they asked for the help of every New Yorker. Tip-offs jammed the police switchboards. Dowd and his detectives had to follow up 250 to 300 leads a day. However, Berkowitz took pity on the police. He wrote them a letter, but dropping it in a mailbox and letting the Postal Service deliver it was too mundane. On the night of the 16th of April, 1977, another young couple went to the movies in New York. They were 18-year-old Valentina Suriani and her boyfriend, 20-year-old Alexander Esau. After they had seen the film, they went on to a party. Around 3 a.m., they were parked in a borrowed Mercury Montego outside Valentina's apartment building in the North Bronx, only 3 blocks from where Donna Loria had been killed. Valentina was sitting on Alexander's lap with her legs stretched out across the passenger seat, enjoying a prolonged series of goodnight kisses when bullets shattered the passenger window. 2 hit Valentina's head, killing her instantly. Another 2 hit Alexander Esau in the top of the head as he dived across the seat towards the passenger door. He died 2 hours later. When the police arrived, they found a white envelope in the middle of the road by the car. It was addressed to Captain Joe Borelli, Deputy Inspector Dowd's second-in-command. The letter was all in capitals and full of spelling mistakes. It appeared to be the work of a madman. The writer claimed that he had been ordered to kill by his father, who was a vampire. His father's name, the writer said, was Sam, hence the new macabre sobriquet of the .44 caliber, Killer, Son of Sam. In the letter, he professed to love the people of Queens, but said he intended to kill more of them, particularly the women, which he spelt as if it rhymed with demon. The writer signed off with the words, I say goodbye and good night. Police, let me haunt you with these words. I'll be back, to be interpreted as bang, 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 yours in murder, Mr. Monster. By the time the letter reached the police labs, 8 policemen had handled it. Only tiny traces of the writer's fingerprints remained. He appeared to have held the letter by the tips of his fingers, and there was not enough of a print on the paper to identify the sender. Consequently, the police kept the existence of the letter secret. However, they showed a copy to celebrated New York columnist Jimmy Breslin. He dropped hints about the letter in his column in the New York Daily News. On the 1st of June, 1977, Breslin himself received a letter. It had been posted 2 days before in Englewood, New Jersey, just over the George Washington Bridge from Manhattan. The Daily News, then the biggest-selling newspaper in America, held back publication of the full letter for 6 days as speculation and circulation mounted. On the 3rd of June, 1977, the News ran the front-page headline, "The .44 caliber killer, new note can't stop killing." The next day, they ran, .44 killer, I am not asleep. By Sunday, they were running, Breslin to .44 killer, give up, it's the only way out. This edition sold out within an hour of going on sale, so the presses kept rolling. By the end of the day, the paper had sold 1,116,000 copies, a record beaten only on the day Berkowitz was arrested. The editors assumed that interest had peaked and reproduced the letter in full in the Monday edition. Again, it was written all in capital letters and showed the same uncertain grasp of basic spelling. The whole letter was something of an anticlimax, as it was as rambling and incoherent as the letter he had sent before to the police. It signed off, "Not knowing what the future holds, I shall say farewell and I will see you at the next job, Oregon. Should I say you will see my handiwork at the next job, remember Ms. Loria, thank you, in their blood and from the gutter, Sam's creation, 44. Then there was a long postscript. Here are some names to help you along. Forward them to the inspector for use by the NCIC, the Duke of Death, the Wicked King Wicker, the 22 Disciples of Hell, John Wheaties rapist and suffocator of young girls. P.S. J.B. Please inform all the detectives working the slayings to remain. At the police's request, this last page was withheld from publication. The reason they gave was that they did not want the NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, known about. But the .44 killer certainly knew about it. Perhaps the real reason was the satanic undertones in the list of pseudonyms he gives. The Wicked King Wicker is presumably Wicca. The 22 Disciples of Hell sounds like some satanic organization. The name Wheaties was put in inverted commas, as if it were a nickname. John Wheaties was supposed to be a rapist and suffocator of young girls. The police could find no trace of him. In fact, none of the names were much help to the Omega team or the NCIC, nor were they any use to Jimmy Breslin, who now began calling the .44 killer the son of Sam. 17-year-old Bronx schoolgirl Judy Placido went to the same school as Valentina Suriani and had been to her funeral. 3 weeks after the Breslin letter appeared, on the 25th of June, she celebrated her graduation from high school at a discotheque in Queens called Eliphas. There she met a handsome young man called Salvatore Lupo, who worked in a gas station. They hit it off immediately and went outside to a car for some privacy. As Salvatore slipped his arm around Judy's shoulders, they discussed the Son of Sam killings. At that moment, their lurid speculation turned into murderous reality. A .44 bullet smashed through the passenger window, passing through Salvatore's wrist and into Judy's neck. A second bullet hit her in the head, but miraculously failed to penetrate the skull. A third bullet entered her right shoulder. Terrified, Salvatore threw open the car door and ran back to the discotheque for help, but it was too late. The shooting was over, and the attacker had fled. Although she had been hit 3 times, Judy was quite unaware that she had been shot. She was shocked to see in the rearview mirror that her face was covered with blood. She too jumped out of the car and headed for the disco, but she only made it a few yards before she collapsed. Salvatore suffered a shattered wrist and cuts from the flying glass, and in hospital it was found that unbelievably Judy had escaped without serious injury. Nevertheless, New York was in panic. Takings at discotheques and restaurants, particularly in Queens, plummeted, while newspaper circulations soared. Not only did they have the gory details of the latest shooting to relay, they could speculate about the next killing. In the Son of Sam's letter to Jimmy Breslin, he had written, "Tell me, Jim, what will you have for July 29th? That was the date of the first murder. Was he planning to celebrate the anniversary of the killing of Donna Lauria with another murder? New York's Mayor Abraham Beame could not wait to find out. He was running for re-election. He quickly announced that even more officers were being seconded to the investigation. Overnight, Omega became the largest single operation in the history of the New York Police Department. 200 men were on the case. They recruited from every borough of the city. The investigation cost more than $90,000 a day to run. Volunteers such as Donna Lauria's father, Mike, manned Special Son of Sam patrols and the hotline, which by then was receiving at least 5,000 calls a day. A team of psychiatrists tried to come up with some sort of profile of the killer. The best they could come up with was that he was neurotic, schizophrenic, and paranoid. This description was duly released by the police. It did not help anyone to identify the gunman. Fortunately, the 29th of July, 1977, passed without incident, but 2 days later, with a sense of relief, 2 sisters from Brooklyn, 15-year-old Ricky Moskowitz and 20-year-old Stacy, decided to go out. In a Brooklyn restaurant, they were approached by a handsome young man who introduced himself as Bobby Violante. The next day, Bobby and Stacy went to see the movie New York, New York. Afterwards, they went to dinner, then headed off to a quiet place where they could be alone. They drove to a secluded spot on Shore Parkway near Coney Island, South Brooklyn, which was used as an urban lover's lane. They felt safe enough there. So far, there had been no Son of Sam killings in the borough of Brooklyn. The nearest shooting had taken place 22 miles away in Queens. What they did not know was that a week before, a man claiming to be the Son of Sam had phoned the Coney Island precinct and said that he would strike next in that area. Extra patrol cars were assigned to Brooklyn and Coney Island. Shore Parkway was being patrolled regularly. Bobby Violante and Stacy Moskowitz pulled up under a street lamp, the only available parking spot. There was a full moon that night. It was not dark enough for what they had in mind, so the two of them went for a walk in the park nearby. They walked over a bridge and spent a few minutes playing on the swings. Near the public toilets, they noticed a man in jeans, who they described as a hippie type, leaning against a wall. He was not there when they walked back to the car. Back in the car, they kissed. Stacy suggested that they move on, but Bobby wanted one more kiss. It was a mistake. While they were embracing, Bobby Violante took 2 bullets in the face, blinding him and exploding his eardrums. He could neither see nor hear, but he felt Stacy jerk violently in his arms, then collapse forward. He feared she was dead. Bobby threw himself against the car horn, fumbled at the car door, cried for help, then collapsed on the pavement. In the car in front, Tommy Zano had seen the shooting in his rear-view mirror. He had watched as a man approached the car from behind and pulled out a gun. From a crouching position, He had fired 4 shots through the open passenger window. When his girlfriend, Debbie Crescendo, heard the shooting, she said, "What's that?" Zino thought he knew. "Get down," he said. "I think it's the son of Sam." Zeno watched as the gunman ran towards the park. He looked at his watch. It was exactly 2:35 a.m. A patrol car was just 5 blocks away at the time. Stacy Moskowitz was still conscious when the ambulance arrived. One bullet had grazed her scalp, but the other had lodged in the back of her brain. She died 38 hours later. Bobby Violante survived, but his sight could not be restored. Tommy Zano gave a good description of the killer. He was stocky with stringy, fair hair. This matched the description given by Donna DeMasi and Joanne Lomino, but not the dark, curly-haired man described by Jody Valente and the neighbor in the DeMasi-Lomino case. The police wondered whether he was wearing a wig. A beautician and her boyfriend were seated by the entrance to the park when they heard the shots. They saw a man wearing a denim jacket and what they took to be a cheap nylon wig. He jumped into a light-colored car and drove off, as if he had just robbed a bank. A young girl on a bicycle identified the car as a yellow Volkswagen. A nurse, who looked out of the window when she heard the shots, also said that she had seen a yellow VW. It almost collided with another car at the first intersection, and the driver was so incensed that he gave chase, only to lose the car after a couple of blocks. The yellow VW's driver, he said, had stringy brown hair. But an even more vital witness took a little longer to come forward. She was Mrs. Casilia Davis, a 49-year-old widow, who had been out with a male friend. They had returned to her apartment 2 blocks from the park at around 2 a.m. They sat and talked for a few minutes, but as they had been forced to double park, they kept an eye open for other cars. A little way ahead, Mrs. Davis saw a police car and 2 patrolmen writing out parking tickets. Some way behind was a yellow Ford Galaxy. It was parked by a fire hydrant, and, a few minutes before, an officer from the patrol car had given it a ticket. A young man with dark hair walked up to the Galaxy and irritably pulled the parking ticket from the windscreen. Mrs. Davis invited her friend in for coffee. He declined, saying that it was 2:20 a.m. already. At that moment, the police car pulled off. So did the Galaxy, but it could not get past Mrs. Davis's friend's car. The man in the Galaxy impatiently honked the horn. Mrs. Davis hurriedly got out and her friend pulled off. The Galaxy followed, passing him quickly and speeding after the police car. Minutes later, Mrs. Davis went out to take her dog for a walk in the park. She noticed Tommy Zano's car, Bobby Violante's car, and a VW van. On her way home, she saw a man with dark hair and a blue denim jacket striding across the road from the cars. He glared at her and he was walking with his right arm stiff, as if something was concealed up his sleeve. He also looked rather like the man with the Ford Galaxy she had seen earlier. Mrs. Davis did not come forward with this information immediately, though. She realized that if the man she had seen was the son of Sam, she was in danger. He could easily identify her and he knew where she lived. 2 days after the shooting, Mrs. Davis told 2 close friends what she had seen. They realized that she might have a vital clue and urged her to call the police. Eventually, her friends called the police on her behalf. Detective Joseph Strano visited her and took her statement. It caused hardly a ripple. Tommy Zano was considered the best witness to the shooting. He had seen a man with fair hair, not dark, and the driver of the Ford Galaxy had left the scene of the crime before the shooting. But Mrs. Davis now felt that she had risked her life to come forward and would not be ignored. She threatened to go anonymously to the newspapers with her story. To humor her, Detective Strano interviewed her again, bringing along a police artist to make a sketch of the man. He also took her on a shopping expedition to see if she could pick out a similar denim jacket, but still nothing got done.
The problem with her story was that the local police had not issued any parking tickets in that area that night, but the police cars patrolling the area had been seconded from other boroughs. It was 10 days before 4 missing tickets turned up. 3 of the cars were quickly eliminated. The fourth, a yellow Galaxy, number 561 XLB, belonged to a David Berkowitz of 35 Pine Street, Yonkers, a suburban area just north of the Bronx. Detective James Justice called Yonkers Police Headquarters. Switchboard operator Wheat Carr answered. Justice said that he was working on the Son of Sam case and that he was checking on David Berkowitz. The woman shouted, "Oh no!" Not only did she know David Berkowitz, but she had also suspected that he was the son of Sam for some time. Her suspicions had begun the previous year, when her father began to receive anonymous letters complaining about his dog. In October, a petrol bomb had been thrown through the window of the Carr's house at 316 Warburton Avenue, Yonkers. A neighbor had also been receiving anonymous letters and abusive phone calls. On Christmas Eve, 1976, someone had fired a number of shots through their window and killed their Alsatian. Then, on the 27th of April, 1977, someone entered the Carr's backyard and shot their black Labrador, Harvey. On the 10th of June, 1977, Wheat's father, Sam Carr, had received a phone call from a man named Jack Casaras, who lived in New Rochelle, out on Long Island Sound. Mr. Casaras wanted to know why Mr. Carr had sent him a get-well card. The card said that Mr. Casaras had fallen off a roof. He had not, nor had he ever been on one. Mr. Carr had no explanation and invited Mr. Casaras over to discuss the matter. The drive took about 20 minutes. Sam Carr examined the card. Strangely, it had a picture of an Alsatian on it, and Mr. Carr told Casaras about the bizarre things that had been happening. Mr. Casaras drove home even more puzzled, but his son thought that he had the answer. The year before, the Casaras family had rented out a room above their garage to a David Berkowitz. He had complained about the Casaras's Alsatian. After a few weeks, he had left suddenly without collecting the deposit of $200. When Mrs. Casaras looked David Berkowitz up in the telephone directory, she found that he now lived at 35 Pine Street, Yonkers. She rang Sam Carr and asked him whether Pine Street was near them. It was right around the corner. Mr. Carr then became convinced that David Berkowitz was responsible for the harassment they had suffered and went to the police. However, the police explained that they could take the matter no further without more concrete evidence. Another of Berkowitz's neighbors, Craig Glassman, had also been receiving abusive letters. He lived in the apartment underneath Berkowitz, but he was a police officer, and when a week after the Moskowitz murder, rubbish was piled against Glassman's front door and set on fire, he reported it. That was the 6th of August, 1977. He also showed detectives 2 anonymous letters he had received. They accused Glassman of being a spy planted there by Sam Carr. Glassman and the Carrs were part of a black magic sect out to get him, the author alleged. The detective who examined the letters recognized the handwriting. It belonged to another man he was investigating, David Berkowitz. However, Berkowitz was not the only suspect in the Son of Sam slayings. New York has a rich supply of potential serial killers. Besides, Berkowitz did not fit the description given by Tommy Zano, nor did he drive a yellow VW, so it was not until the 10th of August 1977 that detectives John Longo and Ed Zigo went to Yonkers to check Berkowitz out. Zigo spotted Berkowitz's Ford Galaxy parked outside the apartment block in Pine Street. There was a bag on the back seat with a rifle butt protruding from it. In New York back then, possessing a rifle did not even require a license. Nevertheless, Zigo forced open the car. Inside, he found another more formidable weapon, a Commando Mark III semi-automatic. Then, in the glove compartment, he found a letter addressed to Deputy Inspector Timothy Dowd.
head of the Son of Sam investigation. It said that the next shooting would be in Long Island. Detective Zigo phoned in and told Sergeant James Shea, "I think we've got him." Police from all over the city were brought in. They staked out the car for 6 hours until Berkowitz turned up. He was a stocky man with a round cherubic face and dark hair. When he got into the driver's seat, he found himself staring down the barrel of a police revolver. "Freeze!" yelled Detective William Gardella. "Police!" Berkowitz simply smiled. Detective John Falatico opened the passenger door, held his .38 to Berkowitz's head, and told him to get out. When he put his hands on the roof, Falatico asked, "Who are you?" Berkowitz answered, "I am Sam." At one police plaza, Berkowitz confessed to the shootings and the anonymous letters. He also admitted that his crime spree had begun on Christmas Eve, 1975. About 7 o'clock, he drove to Co-op City in the Bronx, where his adoptive father lived. He saw a young Hispanic woman leaving a store and followed her. He pulled a knife and stabbed her in the back. She did not realize what had happened, turned, screamed, and grabbed his wrist. He ran away. But on his way home, he followed 15-year-old Michelle Foreman and stabbed her in the back and head. She fell screaming on the sidewalk. Again, Berkowitz fled. Somehow, she managed to stagger to the apartment block where her parents lived. They rushed her to hospital, where they found that she had a collapsed lung. Her other injuries were superficial, and she only spent a week in hospital. His first victim did not even report the attack and was never identified. These early attacks convinced Berkowitz that he needed a gun. A friend called Billy Dan Parka bought him a .44 Bulldog revolver in Houston, Texas for $130. Under interrogation, Berkowitz explained that he had been ordered to commit the murders by Sam Carr via Carr's demon dog, Harvey. Other demon voices accompanied him when he was stalking his victims. Berkowitz was so forthcoming that his complete confession took only half an hour. Further inquiries revealed that Richard David Berkowitz had been an illegitimate child who had been given up for adoption as a baby. His natural mother, Betty Broder, was Jewish. At 19, she married Tony Falco, an Italian-American. He left her for another woman 6 years later. She began an affair with real estate agent Joseph Kleinman, a married man, in 1947. She got pregnant by him, but when she told him that she was going to have a child, he said she had better get rid of it if she wanted to go on seeing him. The child was born on the 1st of June, 1953, and was adopted immediately by a Jewish couple, Pearl and Nathan Berkowitz, who were unable to have children of their own. They named him David, but in 1967, when David was just 14, Pearl Berkowitz succumbed to cancer. He was deeply upset at this new loss. 2 years later, Nathan decided to move to Co-op City in the Bronx, a middle-class suburb, but the area was on the skids and gangs of youths soon began terrorizing the neighborhood. David's school grades plunged and he seemed to lose any sense of direction. He was shy and found himself a victim of bullying, though others saw him as spoilt and something of a bully himself. He was big for his age, strong, and an excellent baseball player, but he liked to play with kids younger than himself. His biggest problem was with girls. One friend remembers Berkowitz asking him if he wanted to join the Girl Haters Club. He only ever dated one girl in Co-op City, Iris Gerhardt. She liked his warm and obliging nature, but the relationship was never consummated. While Berkowitz remained chaste, almost everyone else seemed to be at it. After a while at Co-op City, there wasn't one girl who was a virgin, he said resentfully. Later, in prison, Berkowitz wrote, "I must slay women for revenge purposes to get back at them for all the suffering they caused me." His friends also started smoking marijuana, but again, Berkowitz was too inhibited to join in. Things got worse in 1971 when his foster father remarried. Berkowitz resented his stepmother and stepsister and decided to join the army. But that did not last long. Home again in 1974, Berkowitz had rejected Judaism and become a Baptist. Nathan Berkowitz remembered his son standing in front of the mirror beating his head with his fists. Things became so uncomfortable in the Berkowitz household that David moved out to take a drab one-room apartment at 2151 Barnes Avenue in the Bronx. By this time, Nathan became convinced that his son needed psychiatric help, but Nathan and his new family were moving to Florida, and nothing was done. With his foster father gone, another door closed for Berkowitz. He had known he had been adopted from the age of 7. Isolated, he tried to trace his real family. It took a year. Through the Bureau of Records, he discovered that his real name was Richard Falco, and he came from Brooklyn. Using an old telephone directory, he managed to trace his mother and an older sister. He dropped a card in his mother's mailbox, and a few days later, she called him. The reunion was emotional. He also met his 37-year-old sister and became a regular visitor to the house where she lived with her husband and children. At last, he had found a family, and at last, Berkowitz was happy. Or so it seemed. In the first half of 1976, his visits to his real mother and sister became increasingly rare. He complained of headaches. In February, he moved into the room above the Casaras's garage out in New Rochelle. 2 months later, he moved suddenly to Pine Street, Yonkers. In July, he killed Donna Loria. After a year-long killing spree, the police at last had Berkowitz under lock and key. Judged sane enough to stand trial, Berkowitz pleaded guilty to all charges and was given 6 life sentences. Sergeant Joseph Coffey, who had conducted the initial interrogation, said, "I feel sorry for him. The man is a fucking vegetable." However, not everyone was satisfied with Berkowitz's conviction. Young Yonkers-born investigative journalist Maury Terry spotted a number of inconsistencies in Berkowitz's story. Berkowitz claimed that he had acted alone, but descriptions of the killer varied wildly. Terry also noted that some of the Son of Sam killings had been performed with a ruthless efficiency. Others were inept and bungled. Terry concluded that Berkowitz had only committed 3 of the Son of Sam killings, those of Donna Loria, Valentina Suriani, and Alexander Esau. Terry believes that Berkowitz was a member of a satanic organization, the 22 Disciples of Hell, and that other members of the cult were responsible for the other killings. The killer in the balaclava, Terry believes, was actually a woman member. However, when he tracked down other members, who included Sam Carr's 2 sons, John Wheaties and Michael, they had all died mysteriously before he caught up with them. In February 1979, Berkowitz issued a statement from Attica Correctional Facility saying that he was indeed involved with a satanic group. Then, on the 10th of July 1979, he was slashed with a razor by another inmate. The cut ran from the left-hand side of his throat to the back of his neck. It needed 56 stitches and nearly killed him. Berkowitz insisted that the attack was a warning from his satanic group to make him shut up.